How have the New York Giants draft needs shaped up since the start of free agency? Where can they find the best values? We're going to talk about all that and more with Damian Parson, co-host of Locked On NFL Draft. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and as promised, joining me on today's podcast is the one and only Damian Parson, who is a talent evaluator over at the at the Draft Network, and he is co-host along with Coach Keith Sanchez over on Locked On NFL Draft. So if you're not subscribed to that podcast, if you're not checking that out, please do so. You're really doing yourself a disfavor by not checking out that stuff. Damian, thanks so much for joining me on the pod.
No, I'm glad to be back. Shout out to Giants country, Giants nation, all the love that was sent my way after my first appearance. I appreciate you guys for sure.
Well, we certainly appreciate you. I know a lot of people asked me to have you come back on. So me being a woman of the people, here you are. So thanks again. All right, Damian, let's jump right in here. Free agency is now a few weeks old. Obviously, teams have made moves. How much have the moves that have been made, the way the market has kind of shaped up with free agency? We look at the running back market, for example, that was kind of a weak market. The safety market was kind of weak. How much of that do you think is going to affect the draft in terms of those positions maybe being more at a premium?
I think it's going to affect it. I feel like like you said, the safety and the running back class, I think it had a big impact on the veteran free agents that are out there. This was when you look at the talent at the veteran running back situation, there's a lot of talent, a lot of proven guys with production. They still could tote the rock and still be good football players. But when you look at a draft that goes 4 or 5 rounds, potentially 6 rounds deep into the draftable talent and guys that you can get 7th round, priority undrafted free agents that can fit your scheme, it matters. Of course, the Bijan Robinsons and Jahmyr Gibbs of the world, but you think on day 2, a Tank Bigsby out of Auburn, a Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. Big 2 physical downhill runners. You look at them and they look like NFL running backs that they can start for a team today, and even the safety market, Brian Branch out of Alabama, who plays more kind of the safety nickel hybrid role for defenses. Antonio Johnson, 6'3", 200+ pound safety who could play like a strong, but definitely could play in the nickel hybrid role as well. Christopher Smith from Georgia, former corner who plays safety. There's a lot of depth, and teams view it as, okay, those are 2 positions where it's like, I'd rather go the cheaper option, where I can have cost control for 4 years on a rookie deal than paying a veteran north of $7 million for 3 or 4 years themselves. So I think that definitely played a big part in both of those markets being kind of underwhelming.
And speaking of which, you look at the moves the Giants made. They added a linebacker, Bobby Okereke. They acquired Darren Waller in a trade with the Raiders. Then they added a bunch of, 1-year deal signings. They brought back a few guys. When you look at what the Giants did in free agency, how much do you think that alters what they might do in the draft, if at all?
I think it alters it a little bit. I still believe that now having a Darren Waller, who you may not have a wide receiver 1, but you think about how important it is to have a star caliber tight end. And Darren Waller gives you that. Former receiver that converted over to a tight end. And he's a mismatch issue defensively. He can play out wide. He can play in line as a traditional tight end. You can put him out in the slot. You can isolate him and really is a coverage indicator and dictate coverage, similar to what a Travis Kelce does, what a George Kittle can do, what we've seen with Ron Gronkowski in his time in New England, when he was in his prime and at his peak. So I think with him, having that, bringing that asset in, you still need cornerback, like a number 1 corner, and you would still like to find another receiver to add to this room. But it's like, okay, Quentin Johnston's not there, I don't have to reach for a traditional X in round one, because I can still get a guy like a Zay Flowers or, a Jordan Addison to add them to this group and give Daniel Jones as much playmaking help as possible. But like I said, you still, the need at corner is still a glaring one that you still have to address. So I think it shifts where I could see them going corner over receiver in round one. It depends on who's available. Yes, if Quentin Johnston from TCU at 6'2", 210 and jumps over 40 and runs a 4.4, if he falls into the 20s and he's available, I feel like they will have a hard time passing up on that young man, because he could be that X and give you kind of a Twin Towers look with him and Darren Waller with the other kind of smaller receivers available. But if he's not there, I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if they went cornerback early.
When you talk about receivers here for a second and maybe getting a number one receiver if one is available, can you just explain the pros and cons of having your tight end as your number one receiver versus having a legitimate X receiver, or are there any differences?
Oh yeah, there's some differences for sure. Receivers are typically the more athletic of the two. Those are the guys that you're going to have that's going to run the 4.4s and 4.3s and the game-changing speed and change of direction and everything. Where tight ends are bigger bodies. Some things may be a little more rigid, unless you're a Travis Kelce who moves like he has rubber bands for ligaments, where he's just flexible and does whatever he wants with his frame. The pros to it is very simple. You saw what Travis Kelce was. You look at that Kansas City Chiefs offense this past season, right? Granted, yes, they have Patrick Mahomes. They have 15 back there, and they have Andy Reid. I get it. But when you have a Travis Kelce who you listen to Darius Slay from the Eagles talk about, the only person we really had trouble with in the Super Bowl was Travis Kelce. But it opened up everything else for everyone else, right? Because they still had a bunch of smaller receivers. And then they had like MVS as like their bigger, taller receiver to attack deep. But, Kadarius Toney, smaller guy. Sky Moore is a smaller guy. Juju is the kind of bigger frame dude. But still, Travis Kelce was the engine. So it's like, okay, well, we're going to double team and sometimes even bracket with three people on Travis Kelce. And that opens up the creative playmaking for Kadarius Toney underneath or across the middle. And it just frees guys up, because it's just like basketball. When you have that star player, he draws attention. He makes everyone else's jobs easier. So that's kind of that's a big part of it. And it's a big frame, right? Because typically tight ends really navigate the middle of the field. So it leaves everything else kind of open. And the defenses will get antsy, like, okay, if we don't want to bracket a guy, let me put my number one corner on him. Well, there's kind of some cons to that, because now your number 3 and 4 corner has been put in the game, and he's going up against a receiver that's better than him. And now you got an advantageous matchup that you just created by feeding your star tight end as the point of your offense. And like I said, with the cons, it's just you have to build with, typically for me, if the cons of it is how you build the offense around that tight end. Just like Kansas City, you need to have speed. Guys that can like run after catch guys. It's like having a basketball team, right? And you have the Shaquille O'Neals, the Pau Gasols, the Tim Duncans. You want a Tony Parker, a Manu Ginobili, a Kobe Bryant, a Derek Fisher. You want guys that can, they're hyper athletic and they can do a lot of things after the catch in the NFL, but just got smaller guys that you can interchange. You can move them from either side of the formation. You can put them wherever you want. Because if you're going to take away my big man in the paint, I have guys that can shoot. So I have my deep threats where, all right, that safety starts rumbling down because he's trying to play over the top cloud on my tight end. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Because then I'm going to go right over the top to my speedy receiver, because you just left him one-on-one with a corner that can't run with him. So it's just all about how you build the offense around them. And that's why I'm really intrigued by the Giants, because when they grabbed Darren Waller, I love the move. And I'm like, you know what? If you can't get a Quentin Johnston, that's fine. If you get a Zay Flowers, you get a Josh Downs, a Marvin Mims, you add some juice to this receiving group. Now you have a lot of interchangeable smaller guys that can really help the big man out in the paint.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because Joe Shane, the general manager, Brian Dable, they kind of downplayed the whole notion of we got to get a legitimate big skyscraper X receiver. Just, their whole thing was, let's get guys who can get open, who can separate. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like, maybe they had this whole idea in mind of landing a big time tight end and, building around him. the way you just described.
Yes, man. No, I would not be surprised if that's the thought process they have. And you still have Daniel Bellinger where you want to run some of those 2 tight end sets as well. But with a Darren Waller, him, especially his receiving background, if you have, say you have 2 smaller receivers on the field at the time in that 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, you can motion to like a 2x2 set, but you can put Darren Waller as your X. You know what I mean? And then that pulls the linebacker out there if they're brave. If they're brave defensively, they'll throw a linebacker out there. If they all right, we trust my linebacker, right? Like it's a Fred Warner. Okay, cool. But the size issue is going to still be there. Or they're going to put the safety. And that pulls one of their premier back end help into man coverage versus Darren Waller. Now you have more space to operate with your shifty run after catch dynamic weapons at the other receiver spot. So it gives you more looks that you can really manipulate and really dictate how the defense should. Because at the end of the day, I always use the term, for quarterbacks, you want to make the quarterback's jobs easy because they see one picture pre-snap and they typically defensively you want to show them a whole different picture post-snap. Well, when you have guys that's going to change coverages and change the way the defense is going to move around, that helps change the picture and give your quarterback a picture where it's like, okay, I see what you're doing pre-snap, and now that I motioned Darren Waller out, you just move the guy. There's not much more you can really change now, and this picture may not change a little. It may change a little bit, but it might not be a total different picture after we snap the ball.
Which is key. You want to keep things as simple as possible.
Correct.
For the quarterbacks. So that's a good point as well. Sticking with round 1 for the Giants, they're currently at 25. There are some people who say they should trade out of round 1. There are some people who say they should stay put. I mean, based on, since we last talked, we've had the combine, we've had some pro days, guys' stocks are rising, dropping, which, we'll get into in a little bit. But if you're the Giants at this point and you're looking at the board at the bottom of that first round, are you seeing clusters of guys who maybe have similar grades where the Giants can go need, or are you of the opinion that maybe the Giants would be better off getting out of the first round altogether, giving up that extra year that you would have if you were to get a first round pick and just picking up more draft picks?
I think if you didn't sign Daniel Jones, right, if you just franchised them, I would say you probably trade back, try to get an extra first round pick next year to put yourself in position to go get a Drake May, a Caleb Williams, or one of these other quarterbacks that could be QB 3 or 4. But since they signed Daniel Jones, I say you stay with the pick, with your current pick, and you go best player available, and especially at the position of need. And I truly believe, especially at the cornerback position. Now, and I've talked about it before, like there's a ton of depth, and talent. But in the first round, I think, being able to get one of these like potential CB1 type of guys, right? Like, of course, then Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon, Joey Porter Jr. is a lot of people's top 3. And I expect those guys to be off the board by the time you guys are selecting. But you think about a Deonte Banks out of Maryland, Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State, Julius Brents out of Kansas State, Cam Smith, like those guys, 100%. And even Akili Ringo out of Georgia, bringing that championship pedigree and that big physical, long, athletic body type to this secondary could really change how, could really be beneficial, because these are all guys who have the potential to be CB1s in the defense, especially with Wink Martindale. I think for a guy like him who's used to having such talent while he was in Baltimore at the cornerback position with Marcus Peters and, Marlon Humphrey, all those physical press man guys, no, I stay put and I grab me one of these physical press man corners and I allow him to take this young man under his wing and build this secondary around that skill set. And let's go out there and be able to have a better chance defending a AJ Brown, right? A CD Lamb, a Terry McLaurin. It's enticing it is to trade back. I'd rather stay put and grab one of these corners in the first round.
Hey, Giant fans, the tournament is heating up and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if their first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which teams will be cutting down the net. Make every moment more with FanDuel. What about center? I mean, the Giants lost John Feliciano. They lost Nick Gates. Some people have said, oh, the Giants should maybe think about a center in the first round. I personally think that might be too high for a center. What is your take, and where do you think the best value is to take a center?
I mean, there's one center for sure that is pegged and labeled as a first round. That's John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. Nice young man. Met him in Mobile. But he has a nastiness when you turn on the tape that he's going to try to move guys out of the hole for your running backs, and really he takes protecting the passer personal and serious. Really talented young man, can play especially for the zone run scheme and things of that nature. Strong, really athletic mover, and a good guy, good lateral agility. But one of my guys, I think in the second round, depends on how early or late he could go, is Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin, 6'6", 315, very, very athletic for his size, agile, great anchor, powerful guy who can move big bodies off the line of scrimmage and reset the line and create running lanes for Saquon, but also going up against some of these athletic and powerful NFL rushers. He's a guy that when he gets his hands fit and his feet planted, he could anchor, drop his hips, and really stonewall rushers. So that I think the value for center is going to be more so on day two. You have Emil Ekiyor from Alabama. I'm sorry. He played at right guard, and that's only because they had a need so big there that he had to fill. But he's actually a center. He played center all through high school. So as a guy that's naturally best fit at the center position that you get, more than likely third round, physical, nice wide boxy frame, good lower half, Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas, an offense that was used to spread and QB run stuff that we saw Dayball do with Daniel Jones last year, but also they were run heavy too. So he's very equipped to run the ball. And he's pretty good in pass protection as well. A guy that you can get, truthfully, I think you can get late day 2, early day 3. So I think with center, it's day 2 for sure for me. Oluwatimi from Michigan. Luke Weipler from Ohio State is going to me as a day 3 prospect that can really work for zone-based offense. So yeah, there's some good depth and second, day 2 and day 3 talent at the center position.
Definitely a position the Giants need, especially that interior offensive line. This wasn't very solid for them. I mean, inconsistent. And of course, the Giants downplaying the need, saying that they have some guys that are going to compete, but we all kind of can figure out they're going to go with a center. They have to. I mean, they might as well take a billboard out in Times Square and say that they're going to do that. Damian, who are some of the players that are sneaking into the first round? Maybe guys that, the media, the fans aren't really talking about, but maybe the scouting community is a little bit more high on than those of us on the outside are.
I mean, right now, of course, like I talked about him earlier, Deonte Banks is I think it's almost a done deal that he should be in the first round. Emmanuel Forbes, there's a lot of talk. Both of those are corners, Maryland and Mississippi State. There's a lot of talks about him potentially going in the back end of the first round. And you think about Antonio Johnson, especially with his versatility. Teams look at him very similar as well. The tight ends, man, Dalton Kincaid, Luke Musgrave, Michael Mayer, those 3 tight ends. There's a chance that all 3 could be off the board in the first round. Edge defender Derek Hall, talking on the back end of the first. And then a guy that's been rising that fans are starting to hear more about, but he's been really, like, the NFL has been hiding from everything that I've heard, is right tackle out of Tennessee, Darnell Wright. Big 6'4", 6'5" kid, 315, moves well, physical, powerful, helped anchor that offensive line for Tennessee, which was one of the best offenses, not just in the SEC last year, but they were undefeated and ranked number 1 at one point until they ran to the buzzsaw that is the Georgia Bulldogs. And he was a big part of that offensive line. And then Osiris Torrance out of Florida, block for Anthony Richardson, guard, 6'4", 330, physical, gap scheme guard that's going to move guys. But he showed, after he dropped some weight down in Mobile, heading into Mobile, he showcased well, laterally agile, quicker feet than really expected of him. So it's just like there's definitely guys that, even Mozzie Smith, the D tackle from Michigan, heard some slight buzz on him being a late day one type of guy. Julius Brents, I think maybe I think he may be a lock for the first round, back in the first round as well. So there's definitely some guys that are sleepers that the scouting community is high on, and that the fans are starting to hear more, or should hear more of in the coming weeks.
Where's the best value in terms of either a position group or, within a round? Where do you see the best value for teams?
Oh man, corner. And I think after, of course, day one is going to be extremely valuable, because I believe it's going to be about 5 at least, I think, comes off the board in round one. But day two on corners, there's so many corners and different body types and athletic profiles and scheme fits that if you're a team that needs a corner, but you also need an edge rusher first, that you're in the first round and one of these edge rushers fall to you, you could feel comfortable grabbing that guy grabbing that edge rusher and then doubling back in the second round and grabbing one of these other corners. Some of the guys I listed that potentially could fall to the top of the second round. But you think of Tyreek Stevenson from Miami, tall, really great kid. Met him down in Mobile as well. Tall, long, physical, but a really good athlete, like most kids are from South Florida. Being athletic is just something that's in the bloodlines and in the water down there. Cam Phillips from Utah, measured in shorter than expected. I think the school had him at like 5'10". He came around 5'9" and caught a lot of people off guard. But his game, the ball skills, the stickiness in coverage, you just love that stuff. DJ Turner, the fastest guy at the combine, 4.26 from out of Michigan. To me, one of the better man-to-man cornerbacks in terms of footwork, patient technique. And his ball skills are developing as well, where it's like he's starting to locate the ball better in coverage, and not just locate it, but attack. And that's typically the process for guys that's developing their ball skills. Is first you gotta you gotta cover. It's like phases, right? You want to stay in phase with the receiver. You gotta look fine. Once they break, you gotta look for the ball and locate it. Then you got to have the courage to say, okay, I located. Now let's go make a play. And he started to do that this year for the Michigan, for Michigan's defense. And of course, like I said, even a guy like Eli Ricks out of Alabama, he didn't play much this year. He got hurt. There was some talks that he got in Nick Saban's doghouse. I don't know how true that is, but that's also not hard to do because it is Nick Saban. So, you know what I mean? Like you just miss a meeting or come 5 minutes early to a meeting, or you come on time to a meeting. You're supposed to be 5 minutes early, in terms of being on time. You might get in the doghouse because Nick Saban is a stickler for certain things. But you go back to his freshman year at LSU. This was one of the best DBs in the SEC. Long, good technique, a young man that plays physical press man coverage, and he's got incredible ball skills and instincts in coverage as well. Kind of a coverage scheme versatile guy. I think you could play him in man-to-man, and then you could play him off as like a cover 3 type of corner. Reminds me of Trayvon Diggs for the Dallas Cowboys. You know what I mean? That where he can drop off in coverage, but you got to be wary testing him because of his length and his ball skills. So I think the value truthfully is going to be day 2 for not just corner, but I think receiver as well for teams. This receiver class, no, there's no Jamar Chase, there's no Devonta Smith or Jalen Waddle, but there's a lot of number 2s and 3s in this class in terms of, hey, if I already have a number 1 receiver, or you think, like you said, you have Darren Waller, and you say Darren Waller is the point of our passing offense. That's our number 1 receiver. That's the guy we want defenses to take away. You can grab a Marvin Mims. You can grab a Tank Dell. If you want, especially if the brass over in New York wants a bigger body receiver on day 2, like late day 3, or potentially on day 4. Round 4 and day 3 is Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss. 6'2", 220, 4'4". I believe he was like 39 to 40 inches in the vertical. Still raw to some aspects because of the offense he played in. And that's a big part with some of these receivers. They play in these wide open spread offenses that don't ask them to run a lot of NFL route trees. So that part is a little bit on the developmental side, but like has all the tricks you look for, everything for a big body X receiver that you really, really will enjoy with this young man. So I think the value is going to be day 2 for corner and receiver.
All right. That's good because they're giant needs, even though the Giants have a gazillion receivers, A lot of them are on 1-year deals, and a couple of them are coming back from season-ending injuries. So, don't be fooled, folks, by the number of receivers the Giants have. Damian, let's talk about the defensive side. Now, when we last spoke, I mentioned how the run defense had to be shored up. They have since added Bobby Okereke at linebacker. They brought in Raheem Nunez Roches to be part of that interior defensive line. They probably need a little bit more depth, I would think, because I get the impression they're going to try and move away from having their safeties be those pseudo linebackers. That's just based on what they have. Landon Collins, I don't think is going to be back. Tony Jefferson, who's converting to inside linebacker, I don't think he's going to be back. But that being said, when you look at the middle of that Giants defense, whether it be the defensive line, the interior, the safety, whatever, where do the Giants need the most help, do you think, still? And who are some of the names that you think we should watch for?
Man, I mean, the defensive line could, definitely you want to keep bodies in there, and especially if you do end up paying, I think Dexter Lawrence is up for a contract if he's not already been re-signed. But you adding more depth to that defensive line to where if you want to go with, hey, this is like a rotation of guys, that's a good option. And there's some dudes here in this class, especially on the interior, that you can have fun with. You got Siaki Ika. He's more of a traditional nose tackle in that 3-4 defense. But like a big body, big frame, over 330 pounds that can really take up space. And I think him and Lawrence can share the field if you wanted to move Lawrence down to that 5 tech and really create this really stout front. But linebacker is interesting because, especially on day 2, you think about a Dan Henley, linebacker out of Washington State, former safety. But one thing I saw with him in Mobile is just a physicality and aggressiveness he plays with, uber athletic. Henry To'oTo'o, a guy that's really instinctual, not the greatest athlete, but his instincts are out of this world in terms of just reading and having the ability to get downhill quickly, right? Read what's going on and make a play and get into the backfield. But Noah Sewell, a guy that Noah Sewell was very highly touted coming out of the summer. And I think he was a little overweight this season, which was uncommon for him, but he's a traditional run stuffing thumper, that big frame. I think he's 240, 250 at the combine. I think he plays around 250, 4'6" guy that he loves to hit. And it's you think about having one of those middle linebackers, especially with the front that you kind of already have, that can walk up into that A gap or even just run fit in that A gap and stop any momentum with the run game, especially ISO runs. Teams love to run what we call split zone, where the tight ends kind of off the ball and they come across the formation. Sometimes they go split wham where they lead them into the middle of the offensive line. And when you have a guy like Noah Sewell right there at that middle linebacker spot, he could trigger downhill, and meet them with physicality and stonewall the run game. So I think, linebacker is definitely a position that they could look to improve. Just becoming more physical. I like the defensive line, but I think just continue to add bodies at that second level. Okereke is big. I know you guys had, Gerard Davis at linebacker as well, but I think that they can upgrade. I think Okereke will be fine, but I think putting Noah Sewell beside him, I think Okereke is more athletic than Noah Sewell, and you want to give a nice pair of similar to running backs, lightning and thunder. You want a guy that can move in space, and you want a guy that can really attack downhill and really make the offense feel his presence.
Hey, Giant fans, the Built March Madness bracket is here, but only for a few more days. So we know you have a favorite Built Bar puff or bar, and now is your time to make it count. Go to builtmarchmadness.com to vote for your favorites. I voted for the mint brownie puff. I've stuffed that ballot box as much as I can. And you've got a favorite, I'm sure. So go ahead and support your favorite. Go to builtmarchmadness.com and be automatically entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built, and one lucky Locked On fan will win a 12-month supply to have Built Bars, best puffs or bars delivered directly to their door. Vote every day in March, so there's only a few days left. Don't delay. And don't forget to pick up your favorite Built Bars or puffs at a 15% discount on your first order with the promo code LOCKED15. You look at the edge rushers. There's no Aiden Hutchinson, I think, in this draft. There's probably no Thibodeau in this draft, but is there value that maybe they can get a decent edge rusher to kind of work in when they want to go multiple edge rushers? Or do you think the Giants defense, as it's set up, their pass rush is basically going to be Ojulari, Thibodeau, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and maybe a blitzer coming from the backfield?
I think this edge group is really, really talented, and there's a lot of depth. Of course, the creme de la creme at the top is Will Anderson Jr. out of Alabama, aka the Terminator. So like he's going top 10 for sure. You got guys like Tyree Wilson and Miles Murphy and the Keon White to the world. But I think Will McDonald the fourth. Even if they decide to go that route, and even the first round, I could see him potentially as a late first round pick as well. But I think second round is where you can get him, long, bendy, explosive first step. He's got almost 35-inch arms, 240 type of edge rusher. You look at a Derek Hall, who I talked about earlier out of Auburn, powerful, a guy who could play all three downs if you wanted him to, but if you wanted to bring him off the edge or bring him off the bench as a kind of a DPR, excuse me, like you could do that as well. Then you have like BJ Ojulari, Aziz's younger brother, over at LSU. He's a fastball pitcher, explosive, bendy off the edge. Body type's very different than Aziz. Aziz was more stout where he can play all three downs. I think early on, BJ is probably going to be one of those type of like DPR third down specialist as he continues to fill in his frame. And then you think about Isaiah McGuire out of Missouri, played more defensive end, but he's got the length and build. If you want to stand him up, you can. And the reason why I think this is such an interesting, thing, even with like a Nick Herbig, undersized edge rusher from Wisconsin, is having those two bookends that you have. The one good thing about it, especially with Kayvon, you can reduce him inside. Excuse me, and rush him on guards because he did that in Oregon. You can do that with him. You can stand him up ahead of guards, and you can really kind of go back to, you think about those championship Giants defenses with the NASCAR package where you have the Tucks and you see Yoras and all those different body types where it's like, man, I have 4 defensive ends on the field at the same time, and now it's tough. It's hard for tackles to block those guys. But when you now reduce them inside on guards who are not as quick, it creates such a issue right in the face of a quarterback.
You mentioned that, and what came to mind is Justin Tuck. They used to rush Justin Tuck at defensive, inside. So, and he had a lot of success doing that. So that's a really good point because his quickness just used to absolutely catch guys off guard, and they were successful more often than not. Damian, I want to ask you about quarterback. I mean, even though the Giants have Daniel Jones under contract, Tyrod Taylor is still under contract for another year. I firmly believe the Giants are going to pick up a developmental quarterback. Who are some guys that you think might be a fit for them in that role? Who do you think is going to be there maybe day 3, I don't know, 5th round onward?
Oh, man. Jaron Hall out of BYU, and coming into the Senior Bowl, I had a day 2 type of view on Jaron Hall, and I think he's still a good player. It's just tough because this young man had a very, very rough go at it in Mobile. 2 the inconsistent practices. He did not look like the quarterback he was at BYU on film, and then he left before the 3rd day of practice, so he left early, which I'm sure was an agent's decision. It's like, hey, let's protect whatever stock you have left. Let's not continue to compound bad performances. But you pop on the tape, a young man that's very Kyler Murray-ish in terms of dynamic and open field. He can run the ball and improvise if you need to, but he's got good arm talent, can throw the ball with touch, timing, and anticipation at all 3 levels of the defense. He is an older prospect because, a lot of times those kids at BYU, they do their missions of the Latter-day Saints and they go overseas for about 2 years. So I believe he had a 2 years mission that he was on, which, they don't play football, in the States during that time. So that's why he's a little bit of an older prospect, but I think he's somebody that could be a nice developmental piece. Tanner McKee, in this offense out of Stanford, 6'6", over 200 pounds, big arm, can really drive the football, and he's developing his ball speed and how to take something off of the passes and learning how to layer the ball. And he's got a little. He's more of a pocket QB, but he's got a little bit of a running ability in his game where he can get you out of some spots. And of course, like the toolsy kid that you can get definitely on day 3. I think 5th, 6th round, Tyson Bagent out of Shepherd, saw him down in Mobile as well. I remember Jim talking about him on the conference call with all of us in the scouting and media world. And we saw the arm talent. This kid's mobile. He's athletic. He's just very raw. And it's like one of those guys where you take on day 3. He's probably your QB3 behind Tyrod, and he's got the headset on, but he's listening to everything that Daniel Jones and Tyrod are talking about, and he's taking everything in. And from what I've gathered, I think he is a guy that's willing to be coached up and willing to take his time to try and get himself to a starting role. And he's a talented kid. He's just raw.
Final question for you, Damian. Now that the combine is done, now that, a lot of the pro days are in the books, and you probably have had a chance to go back, look at some more film and whatnot. I know I asked you this last time you were on the show, but I'm going to ask you again. Who are some sleepers that are maybe emerging, regardless of round, that you think might be giant fits?
Corner. And he's one of my guys in this class. Carrington Valentine. I believe he ran a sub 4.4 at this at the Kentucky Pro Day. This is a young man that's new to the position still, as a corner, that so much so, like, going back to high school, he spent his first 3 years at receiver. He didn't play corner ever until his senior year of high school. So he's only played corner for about 3 years of his life. So he's still learning, but he's aggressive, physical, athletic. He's a guy that you turn on the tape against Tennessee, and Carrington's smaller than, like, Cedric Tillman for Tennessee is 6'3", 215, almost 220. And he met him with so much physicality at the line of scrimmage over and over again. I absolutely love what this kid can become. Corey Trice, out of Purdue, I think he's like 6'2", 6'3", maybe a little taller, over 200 pounds, ran a 4.47, big physical guy that can really get in the face of receivers and press you and really kind of disrupt what you want to do offensively and throw off timing, especially for those timing offenses. Another sleeper, Alex Austin out of Oregon State, him and his teammate, Rajon Wright, really like both of those guys. Just, especially he's a better athlete, I believe, of the two, more fluid mover. And then I think it's Cameron Mitchell out of Northwestern. Tested very well at the combine. Turn on this tape. Knows one of his teammates, and he talks so highly of him, how he studies hard, he continues to work hard, but he's sticking in coverage, and that athleticism translates, and everything he was able to do look fluid in his drills. So I really came away impressed with him. And then of course at wide receiver, Darius Davis, especially for the Giants, he's a smaller guy, of course, but it's someone that you look at is like, okay, he's a dynamic return threat, can kind of move into the slot and be that wide receiver 4 if you need him to be. And of course, I talked about, Jonathan Mingo earlier, but especially as for size, right? Matt Landers out of Arkansas is one of my sleepers as well. It was 6'4", 200 pound, ran 4.3. Explosive young man, really fast. And he actually runs better routes than I expected him to when I turned on the tape. But another big body guy is Bryce Ford Wheaton out of West Virginia, 6'4", 220, and he ran a 4.37. And it's like, okay, these sleeper guys that you can get, late day 2, potentially early day 3, or if not, in the 3rd round in general, that can really fit this team, whether at corner and be physical in this man coverage scheme that Wink Martindale wants to run, but as these receivers add another big explosive weapon. Because one thing about Daniel Jones, I've always wanted to see him get better at is take more risk. And I want to phrase this correctly, not with interceptions, but more so he's a little timid in terms of the back shoulder fades. And so I want to see him, give him big bodies where he can feel comfortable saying, you know what? I can trust my guy. I'm going to put it where he can get it, right? And give him a shot. That's what I always saw. Give a shot throws. Give him a chance. Those give a chance throws. He'll have that with Darren Waller. I would love to see them add a Bryce Ford Wheaton or a Matt Landers or a Jonathan Mingo. These big 6'2" and taller receivers that are really athletic with ball skills that can help him out in that area.
Yeah, and the more help you can give to Daniel Jones, I mean, you just invested a lot of money in him, so you better get him talent.
Correct.
not just in terms of pass catchers, but in terms of offensive line, which, as I said, continues to be a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
And again, to a degree, defense, you want to create short fields, you want some playmakers. I mean, the Giants, I think, were like near or at the bottom of the league in interceptions last year, which is just wild if you consider that, but yet they, and then the run defense, like I mentioned, but it just seems like slowly but surely, general manager Joe Shane chipping away at the needs. He's got 10 draft picks in this class, can certainly check off a lot of boxes that are remaining, I would think.
100%. I totally agree. I think this is a good draft for your Giants. I think they handle it and just navigate and maneuver it correctly in terms of where they prioritize, what they prioritize in like the first round. It could dictate what they do in the rest of the rounds. But if they do it correctly, I think they can come out with a lot of talent that could play it pretty early on.
Fingers crossed, because, after last year's rebuild, and well, actually it wasn't really, it was kind of a rebuild, but 9-7-1, a playoff berth, winning in the playoffs, but still quite a ways to go before the Giants closed the talent gap with the Eagles, who, despite all the losses that they had, probably still the creme de la creme in the NFC East. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. They have the team that, can really make it back, especially then they have the draft capital too, 2 first-round picks, a second. They have the draft capital too. When, hey, we know we're going to pay Jalen Hurts. Let's continue to add some pieces. Let's get this defense back to where we want it to be. Maybe add the third receiver and a running back. And then it's like, man, if they hit a home run, like it makes it harder to defeat these guys for the next couple of years.
Well, hopefully the Giants will be able to do that, because I know I'm sick of them beating the Giants every single time, it seems. But Damian, thank you so much for the great information. I'm just amazed at how you remember all these names and these measurements and the sizes and everything like that. Just shows you do your homework, my friend.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank y'all for having me on the show again.
Oh, my pleasure. He's Damian Parson. You can find him on the Draft Network. He's a senior talent evaluator. You can also find him along with Coach Keith Sanchez on Locked On NFL Draft. And that show's available Monday through Friday, right? You guys are Monday through Friday. Now is the time, folks. You want to be tuning in, because these guys got some good stuff. So please do yourself a favor, like and subscribe to their channel. They're on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. For Damian Parson, I'm Patricia Trainer. Thank you so much, Giant fans, for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday with all new episodes of the Locked On Giants podcast. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody.